Hey guys, this is Coach Jay, and welcome to Blue 57. Tonight we are going to talk about the new NIL legislation, the new NIL bill that was recently passed by the NCAA. We want to try to figure out what it means to the players, what it means to the parents, what potentially how it could affect teams and coaches and everything else. And so tonight we're going to talk about the NIL, and we're going to talk about that bill that was recently passed. And so I'm going to go to Catherine in New York and get her take on it. Hey, Catherine.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good.
So in general, what the NIL is, it's the allowance of NCAA players to profit off their name, image, and likeness, which they were previously not allowed to do under the NCAA. So this change is a very big deal in the college sports world. And on June 21st, the Supreme Court had actually unanimously voted in favor of collegiate athletes that the NCAA could no longer prohibit them from monetizing their name, image, and likeness. They cited a lot of antitrust laws, so that's how we got to where we are now. And as of July 1st, the college athletes are now going to be allowed to profit off their name, image, and likeness under some temporary rules passed by the NCAA.
So what's the impact of this?
Well, start off by saying that the schools are not directly paying their players. They will still be receiving potential scholarships that will cover the cost of tuition, but players instead can go out and reach out to companies, different organizations, boosters, and do potential advertisements for them to make some extra income, receive some free gear, or promote their own brand. The NCAA will still require athletes to follow a set of laws and guidelines. Currently, they have a set of interim laws that will fall in place for the 2021-2022 season, and then follow up with a full extensive set of laws within the next few months. Some states restricted schools from arranging deals with athletes, but now the NCAA has kind of come in and said, hey, everyone can do this. So it's a level playing field for all colleges going forward.
Yeah, so I mean, so when you say a level playing field, you do mean that it's the same rules, but it may not be the same, may not be a level playing field for certain schools that have wealthier alumni. So no, I don't mean to laugh, but I understand what you're saying. So no, that's good. So Catherine, the schools are going to have to, I'm assuming that the schools have to sign off on these deals because this thing could get bad and go in the wrong direction really quick. So how do they police it? How do they keep control over this thing?
So in short, the NCAA right now has left a lot up to the individual institutions on how they want to handle this and what direction they want to go with. In general, all like the complications, all the questions should be handled through the university's compliance department, who will have the most knowledge on what is and isn't allowed. Right now, what we're seeing is most universities are requiring students to disclose any agreements they're signing into within 24 hours. And that includes what the deal is, the company, all that, compensation. So that way the school can make sure it's in compliance with not only the NCAA, but that the deal doesn't conflict with values of the university or existing sponsorships, to make sure that they're able to protect their athletes' eligibility. Because in the event the students were to do something that isn't allowed, it'll hurt their playing, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of them being able to market their NIL in the first place.
Right. So basically, if I show up and give a player a McDonald's bag with $10,000 cash in it, he can advertise that McDonald's brand or whatever, but you can't pay, a booster can still not pay a athlete directly just because they want that athlete to go to their school.
Yes, that's correct. The NCAA has made it very, very clear that even if schools are going to help facilitate these NIL agreements, that they in no way can be used as a recruiting tool. So they can't be special deals. Say, if you come to this school over your other school choice, you're going to get X amount of deals, all that stuff. The NCAA has made it very clear that it can't be a direct, recruiting tool to get them to come in. That's not to say that certain schools, just because of the business opportunities where they're located, won't have an impact on recruiting. It's just that the NCAA has made it very, very clear that the schools can't guarantee any agreements or any money for coming there to play, for staying instead of transferring. And as far as like their athletic performance. That's like another thing the NCAA has made very clear. There's no form of compensation for doing well in a game, touchdowns, points, as far as football, any of that. The NCAA has made that a pretty firm no.
Yeah. So Michael, I can very easily see a wealthy booster basically saying he's going to go to his university and he's like, we got 85 scholarship players. I'm not going to pay the walk-ons. I'll just pay the scholarship guys. We got 85. I pay him $100K a year, $100,000 a year. 8.5 million is his investment in his college. Now, he's given other resources to the school over the years. I mean, there's plenty of donors that have given, $40 million checks, stuff like that. So for $8.5 million, you got 85 players at Penn State, Ohio State, that are going to make $100,000 a year, and they will do marketing for a bank, whatever the entity is. But pretty much, it's at some point, I'm guessing that somebody's going to come forward with a deal like that, where everybody knows if you sign with Penn State, that's $100K a year for 4 years as a committed player. So is that argument wrong? Is that, how does that argument wrong?
Well, Coach, as of right now, that would be totally legal up to the NCAA's limitations. Unfortunately, right now, it's kind of the wild, wild west going on right now. Anybody can really do what they want as long as they follow those common limitations. In the future, we might see something that a certain business can only sign a certain amount of athletes or pay them a certain amount. But for right now, those limitations do not exist. Now, the one thing to remember is when we're talking about a marketed school such as UCLA compared to a school like Iowa, while both programs might be different in how they play, how they market their players, where they get their revenue from, it's good to realize that it might be the breaking decision of a certain player deciding whether they want to go and market themselves in Iowa City or the city of Los Angeles. To compare, the city of Los Angeles has around 5 million people within its metro population. Iowa City has around 100,000.
Right, for sure. And on top of that, their UCLA's got a booster base that's worth a lot more, a lot more money. So they can put that money out. So Catherine, do you think that that's a possibility that somebody basically adopts their school? They put up $8.5 million and they say, hey, everybody here gets that. Now you're going to have to sign playing cards. You're going to have to show up at these events. You are going to have to work on this entity's behalf, but we're going to pay you $100,000 a year, which basically is $8,000 a month.
I mean, under the current interim rules, yes, I definitely think that's a possibility. It's also worth noting that the NCAA's made it clear that a lot of these agreements all have to be for fair market value. So you would have to actually be doing $100,000 a year's worth of work at like the current market rate in order to be allowed to do that or risk your eligibility. I also don't know long term if you would see that, just because as far as like recruiting like very talented players, because realistically, if you're the top recruit in the country, you're a quarterback, you have a shot at the Heisman, like you might not $100,000 a year is a lot, but you could go to another school maybe with a better program and make still the same amount or even more. So I think it really just depends on what the NCAA is gonna do and what schools are choosing to do that. I mean, if an Alabama offers that much money compared to like an Iowa, like we were saying, I mean, yeah, that's definitely a possibility that a lot more people are going to be way more inclined to go there if they can. But I think it really just all comes down to what the NCAA is going to do in the next year, which no one really knows.
Well, my personal belief is watching the NCAA, they really want to try to, they really don't want to be touching anything. They would rather leave it up to the institutions and give it kind of broad guidelines. But it's tough for them because certain schools like Alabama and Auburn that have very motivated fan bases, people are willing to put up a lot more money. And I mean, it's just going to be a matter of time. I'm telling you that, I mean, truly, if a player who is a scholarship player shows up for 8 events a month, I don't know that anybody could argue that that's not worth $1,000 per event. He's showing up, he's playing golf, he's he's speaking to a group of people that are, you know, whatever. I mean, you could get to you could get to that pretty quickly with the status that these guys are getting ready to have. So the player's market value is not the same as Joe Schmo, who's a finance major at the same school. That guy might only be able to get $30 an hour, whereas a player who wears the uniform, brings the jersey to an event, all that, I can see that guy getting $1,000 for that event, signing some footballs that they auction off, and boom, he just got paid, you know, $8,000 for, you know, each month.
Coach, may I just add, I know you'd mentioned like if they bring their jerseys, institutions are already prohibiting like game issued equipment and stuff from being used in these agreements. And a lot of schools are already prohibiting use of their logos, their trademarks, their catchphrases, all of that. So that would have to be something left out of most of these agreements. And I think going forward, you're going to see that you couldn't go to an event as this school's quarterback and promote your name, image, and likeness. It would have to be based off you. I know you just mentioned the jersey, so I just wanted to add that in.
So go ahead, Michael.
Another thing to add in, Coach, this is really going off what Catherine said. It's going to be how well they can build the brand for themselves, because you could have a Heisman caliber player, but if he's not on social media, if he's not outreaching to a lot of people, his value is going to be plummeted. He might be a great player, but maybe a backup who has 100,000 followers on TikTok might actually be more valuable because he has a better outreach to a lot of people.
Right. So, okay, so you guys are going down that social media channel, and I get it, and that is probably where a lot of that stuff is going to be seen. I guess I'm thinking more big picture where guys adopt an entire program, because I think that some of your big donors, they just want to make it clear, if you go to Ohio State or Penn State or whatever the school is, you're going to be on the payroll. And I think it's only a matter of time before we see that happen with one of the schools. And maybe it's 50 grand a year, I don't know, but I mean, $8.5 million is not a ton of money to have 85 people texting on your behalf, tweeting, Instagramming, you know, all that kind of stuff, and showing up at events and stuff like that. So but I think what you guys are talking about is some of the individual stars, people that have big followings, that are Heisman Trophy kind of people, the Trevor Lawrence people. You're right. They're going to have their own separate deals on top of that. So those guys can really get up there pretty quick by doing stuff, speaking on behalf of a car dealership, getting paid $20,000 every time they do it. I mean, so yeah, it can get up there pretty quick. So do you guys see this as primarily a Power 5 play, or do you think it's gonna work down to Group 5 and D2 schools, and how far down, and as well as soccer and women's volleyball and softball and baseball and all that? How do y'all see?
So definitely, I think it's going to work its way down. Just from being on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, you can already see that women athletes are getting deals, soccer players, tennis players, any sport under the sun, the deals are coming. I think as far as the big money, at least in the time being, I don't necessarily see, say, a D2 or a D3 player for soccer making or doing a $2 million deal. But the money, I think, is going to be spread around. I think a lot more small local businesses too, regardless of Power 5, Group 5, not like outside of Division 1. In a small town, you know, the star soccer player, that's still a big deal to have come stand at your restaurant. So I do think you'll see the money being spread throughout the entire NCAA. I just don't think you'll be seeing the same number of dollars be going to smaller programs or smaller or less popular sports.
Right. What about you, Michael?
Yeah, I think every school, like you have said, has boosters, has a connected alumni network. And regardless of the level of the sport, I feel like there's going to be people that want to see just someone from their school, someone from their community representing who they are. You know, if the kid is, you know, a star athlete, star student, you know, model athlete, you know, you're going to want to put them on your product because that's what you're going to want to align yourself with in the future.
Right. So the individual people for different programs, if you're a shining star and you're seen as a hard worker and you have a good brand, it doesn't really matter what the sport is. Alumni and businesses are going to seek you out now because they didn't have the ability to do that before. But now they're like, hey, let them advertise my cars, let them advertise NetJets, whatever it is, because they want that branding because the brand's good. I know this thing is still pretty new. Have there been any cases that have happened so far where you've seen some deals go through and people are getting paid? And has anything come through the channels yet?
Yeah. One of the bigger deals that just came through that is reportedly going down, Hersey Miller, a Division I commit to Tennessee State, is reportedly going to have a $2 million deal endorsement that was brokered by his father, who is a famous rapper, Master P. And that's going to, start this whole argument. Well, if you've got a famous dad who's a multi-million-dollar businessman, are you going to have a better chance marketing yourself compared to, say, Joe Schmo at the University of so-and-so?
So yeah, no, for sure. So Catherine, how does that guy, how does he get fair market value and justify $2 million deal? That kid's, you're talking about an 18-year-old kid making 500 grand a year. So
I think it goes back. I think a lot of it also does go back to, like Michael had said, like with social media. I mean, if you have, say, 5 million followers on something or a couple million, any ad that you would do, whether you're an athlete or not, I mean, there are influencers out there that make their living this way. The numbers have kind of already been figured out, not necessarily for athletes, but for, the same comparable level of brand exposure. So I think that's probably going to be used as far as determining fair market value. And then it also kind of just goes back to like simple business. I mean, if someone's willing to pay for it, pay this amount for you to provide a service, who's to say that's not necessarily fair if it's not, $10 billion, as long as it's like within a reasonable thing. And I really do think you will see like people like in that position, just more well known, definitely making the big bucks, especially at first.
Well, and the other piece to it is the second that came out, and I know that was a totally public relations stunt. The second that it came out, he immediately probably picked up another 50 or 60,000 followers, and so so his value went up considerably. And I mean, who knows if that deal is actually a $2 million deal or what it is? But I guess when you're a famous rapper, you can say what you want and you get a lot of publicity for it. Probably wasn't bad for his career either. So, all this stuff just gets, kind of gets all this stuff going. I think that's the kind of stuff that I don't like as much, because I think that just really limits it to just a handful of people that are going to be able to get those kind of deals. And that's the part that gets a little bit tough. I think that they're, I don't know how you legislate that, but that makes it hard. And do you think that there's going to be some animosity between people that are playing the sport for the love of the sport and because the love of the team versus the guys that are immediately putting out there on Twitter, hey, I'm open for business. Let me know if you want me to sponsor your stuff. Is there going to be kind of a split between these are the true blue sports people and these are people that are trying to capitalize on this opportunity?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of people that kind of are torn between this, thinking, hey, it's going to ruin the game itself. It's going to ruin why they play. And then you're going to have a group of people that are saying this is going to help grow the game because now all these athletes that weren't allowed to promote themselves and promote the game can do that. And I think you're going to see a little bit of clash between that. I think it'll work in the favor of the latter. I think you're going to see a lot more growth within the game, a lot more people reaching out, interacting with their favorite college players like they couldn't before.
Yeah. How about you, Catherine?
Yeah, I mean, whenever you involve money into things, of course, there's the opportunity for animosity to arise. But I think long term, I don't think it'll make that big of an impact as far as like relationships between the players. I do think that you might see, though, there will still be some players who are going to prioritize, playing, practicing the team over making the money, especially when we're considering players who very well could end up playing professionally. I think when you start to look at like that class of athlete, your effort needs to be put into different things. Like you might not make as much as your teammate now, but when you're, looking at a career that you've worked your whole life for, where you'd be making millions upon millions, sometimes it might not be worth it to be putting all this effort into promoting your image now, because at the end of the day, college is 4 or 5 years, you know what I mean? Like at the end of your playing, most of these people probably wouldn't still be getting these deals. So I think you'll see that balance kind of come up. And I think you'll also see some of the players who, I mean, yes, they play D1, but they're most likely not going to end up playing professionally. This actually gives them an opportunity to make an income off of the sport that they've been playing. And when you just consider how much comes in because of these programs, I think it's like really only fair, and it's only about time that, especially the people who aren't going to probably make it professionally, to get some form of return on their effort.
Right, especially when they have the chance to injure themselves, and the injury lasts long past the 2 to 3 years at college. So yeah, for sure. The one thing that I see with the transfer portal being like it is, I definitely see if you got a rising star quarterback out there, I think that the boosters are going to figure out a way to get in touch with that guy and say, you come to this school and you get this. So I do think that there's going to be hard money on this, but I think there's also going to be soft money that's being played at this too, where you come to this school and you get this deal. But I think that there's going to be, I do think there's going to be cash floating around a little bit more, just that, that's not reported. I think you're just going to see more of that. And, it's just kind of what happens, because now people are trying to figure out, how do we get the best guys at our school? And so, now that money's entering into the picture, it's going to be, when you're dealing with people that have a lot of money, they know how to make it happen. So, and especially with young people that are not as savvy and don't understand the implications of doing things the honorable way and that kind of stuff. So the other piece that I see is, if I'm playing a team and the quarterback has got some kind of big deal, I can promise you this: every one of those defensive linemen, they're going to try to take that guy's head off, because they're like, because the coaches are going to tell them, that guy's getting $500 grand a year. You guys ain't getting squat. You better freaking go get that guy. And I mean, it is going to be a motivator for a lot of people, because they're going to be like, who is this guy? He thinks he's all great. And it's going to kind of separate the haves and the have-nots, because there's going to be a lot of players out there that they're not getting any deal. They don't have any brand, and they're just out there playing football, and they're going to be playing against guys who are more like Deion Sanders, and they're trying to work their brand, work their Twitter followers, and all that kind of stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see how that whole thing plays out over time. But the NCAA, they got all the control. So if things get too crazy, they'll just reel it back in, and which is, everything usually takes adjustments. Michael, do you have any other comments about it?
Not at the moment.
Not at the moment. This is the last chance. Catherine, what else? Is there anything else that you see about it?
I would just say, as like a general statement about the whole thing, yes, there's a lot of speculation. We've been throwing things around here. I think at the end of the day, when you're an athlete, it's going to be very, very important to know your school's individual rules, and make sure you're really following along with like your compliance department and all the rules and regulations they set forward. Because at the end of the day, everything you've worked for can be taken away overnight just by one misstep. And I think that's something that I think all athletes, all sports should really be paying close attention to right now with all this, because it's new.
Yeah, so that is excellent points, because the deal is, anytime you do business with the wrong person, it's not going to work in your favor. There is no such thing as doing business with a bad person and it working in your favor. It's always going to blow up. And, guys still have to do it within the law. So if there is money being given to players underneath the table, I don't know what jurisdiction that falls under, but you know, people could go to jail for taking money that has not been allocated the right way. So things, you know, for college athletes, if it doesn't smell right, you better run it through your compliance office. And even if it does smell right, you got to run it through your compliance office and talk to them about it, because a bad deal, like you said, it not only could end your college career, but it could leave a lasting mark where you were the person that was written about that tried to take money from this people, and your reputation is forever tarnished. So all of those are things to be considered with. And you know, and as a general rule, all college students should be thinking that same way, is that, you know, this is your brand, and this is your reputation, and you can't get your reputation back. If once your reputation is tarnished and you have a certain name, you can't get that back. So you have to work hard to keep your name brand good. So this is excellent. So I appreciate you guys looking into this, letting us know what it's about. It's the name, image, likeness rule, and NIL, and it's going to be probably a big play in September, October, and I think next year, by the time we get to signing day, I think it's going to be ramped up to a whole nother level. So we're kind of in the early stages of it, but you guys, I appreciate the insight on it, and thank you guys.
Of course, no problem.
All right. So anybody that wants to, if you want to follow Blue 57, we're at blue57.net. We have, we're on Twitter at blue57_. So check us out there, and for continuous videos on this subject and many others. And we'll be doing more recruiting and scouting stuff going into the fall. So thanks, and we'll see you on the ball field.